Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to Lunch with Books. Today we're talking all about glass. This is the last program in our series having to do with glass for Glass Month, which is April. When we put in the exhibit upstairs, we invited a gentleman you may know to write a poem about glass. And he agreed to do it. And he's here today to read that poem. So please welcome the Poet Laureate of our state, Mr. Mark Harshman.
Thanks, Sean, very much. And this is very scary. I never read anything that's quite so new, and I'm digging myself a deeper hole because I thought I'd read a very short poem by James Wright first, our own Martins Ferry-born James Wright, because he had a wonderful little poem that he wrote for his father, and his father worked at Hazel Atlas for many, many years, and I thought you might want to hear this poem to begin. And the only word in here that might be foreign to you is the word cognac, which is an old word for, I've touched the keypad here, Holly or Sean, so forgive me. But cognac simply meant, oh, it's changing up there too, sorry. Means an outsider, and there's plenty of us who are outsiders, right? So, Youth by James Wright. Strange bird, his song remains secret. He worked too hard to read books. He never heard how Sherwood Anderson got out of it and fled to Chicago, furious to free himself from his hatred of factories. My father toiled 50 years at Hazel Atlas Glass, caught among girders that smashed the kneecaps of dumb cognacs. Did he shudder with hatred in the cold shadow of Greece? Maybe. But my brother and I do know he came home as quiet as the evening. He will be getting dark soon and loom through new snow. I know his ghost will drift home to the Ohio River and sit down alone, whittling a root. He will say nothing. The waters flow past, older, younger than he is or I am. I like that tribute to all the men and women who worked in the factories, the glass factories here in Wheeling and the surrounding neighborhoods. My own poem I've titled A Glass Chalice, and I make a reference to Robert Frost's famous poem about fire and ice here. I have glass in my own heritage. My granddad, when he left working for the railroad, worked for Anchor Hawking in Winchester, Indiana for the last decades of his life. And my mother's wedding glass was from Imperial, which little did I know was right here in the Ohio Valley that I would come to know as an adult. In the poem I mention, and Holly may correct me, my understanding of what the process is, the rudimentary process in making glass. I have allusions to James Joyce's Ulysses and Bloom as he lays in his bath thinking about making more children, forgive me, and I reference two great Scotch drinks, Balvenie and Macallan's, and I also play around with transubstantiation, which is a very dangerous thing for someone who's not of the Roman persuasion to do, but I do it with all great respect, and mysteries with a capital M. And here we go, A Glass Chalice with an epigraph from Muriel Rukeyser, who of course is, we have a fondness for here in West Virginia because of her own famous work about the industrial disaster in the south of the state. The epigraph goes from the Book of the Dead, now they are feeding me into a steel mill furnace. Oh, love, the stream of glass, a stream of living fire. A glass chalice. In this beginning, not dust to dust, but sand, sand to flame, Not the fire next time, but each time white hot. And then not what you might have thought. Soda ash and limestone and sand brought to a steel table and mixed all together, and you'd not have much to write home about. Even if the stone's been pounded, then commingled with sal soda and sand, it's still just a dusty mess of grit and ash. But light a match to it and we can begin, as so much does begin in a holocaust of flame where it becomes neither liquid or solid, but rather an amorphous solid. Then, iced down, rapidly cooled, though not with frosty hate, which would not suffice, but with something nicer like affection tinctured with salt like tears or sweat, and so onwards with breath, a hollow tube the gaffer will begin to shape with his blowpipe, with jacks and blocks of fruit wood, with steam and skill and vision, and by such process then have come to this chalice before us now, here. Is this then a cup for saving on the top shelf or somewhere lower? A cup for everyday use or salvation? A cup of rescue or... It is clearly not the agate stone of the Holy Grail. It is certainly more familiar, less hidden, is clear as the glass it is clear as an everyday sky under which you head out to your shift in the mill. But could it not hold the mystery too? Or should I say a mystery or two? An Irish priest has confided to me that this soda lime glass will not pass muster with canonical or liturgical law. But I say, if in dire straits, then wine and glass must be relied upon to still work some sort of transformation, if not transfiguration, at least work a kind of minor miracle of hopeful metaphor, that out of the bloom of the bath might be remembered the seed spawns thousands, and so from hoc est corpus meum may at least the corpse become life. And see, even for a poor protesting nonconformist like me, see through this lovely and clear glass, born from flame, the hope of a drink, if not from the body's fluid core, then at least with a good port or sherry. It might happen. I suppose hoping for Balvenie or Macallan would be hoping too much, but I stray. We need at least a good leaded glass to allow the sighted revelation of how fire and hope made this beautiful, how hope and metaphor might meet mystery on its own terms, and through beauty lift us up, just as we now lift this glass to each other, to what might yet come to save us all, and so to love the stream of living into forever. Thank you very much.
Well, I'll get to it in a minute. Yeah. The reason that's there, thank you, Mark, by the way. We want to thank Mark. One more round of applause. The exhibit is called Poetry of Glass, so that's why we've taken that route. And we appreciate that. Now, this exhibit that's being taken down by Gene is there because you can win that piece of stained glass that you see here if you enter the raffle, which will be drawn next week at our Center Foundry program on May 6th. You can enter one per person. Okay, I don't want to take up all of Holly's time. So let's get to today's program. Holly McCluskey, the curator of glass at the Museums of Ogilvy Institute, is here to tell us about the history and stories of Wheeling's 5 major glass tableware companies, which included Ritchie, Sweeney, Hobbs Brocuner, Central, and Northwood. Holly has a master's degree in museum studies from WVU and has been with the museum since 1984. Please welcome Holly McCluskey.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, 1984, I like to say, started out as a child. I just want to thank you all for coming. We have so many illustrious people in the audience. You know, we have our great historians here, like Jeannie and Margaret and Christina. And thank you, Christina, this was all your idea. Thank you for pulling this together and making April the month of glass, which is really very cool. The exhibit upstairs, by the way, is lovely. But anyway, Mark, that was an amazing poem and a perfect segue into what I'm talking about with the soda lime glass that you mentioned, because that formula was invented in Wheeling in 1864 and revolutionized the American glass industry. And literally, ever since then, any glass that we're using, I'm looking around, we all have plastic on our tables, I think, but you know, you go anywhere to any restaurant, any glassware, it's all a derivative of that formula. Even Pyrex, even windshield glass. It is amazing how far-reaching and what a big deal that was. So, very cool. How many of you have been to the Glass Museum? Raise your hands. Oh, wow. Have you been since we reorganized it and redid it since we had the big disaster? Well, I know you have, Michael. He said he was going to sit in the back and heckle me, and he really is. We had a sprinkler head that burst at Carriage House Glass in the gift shop a couple of years ago. It was February 1st. It was cold, and it burst. It flooded the gift shop and the museum, which is below it, and we had to start from the studs. We had to take everything. It didn't break any of the glass, fortunately, but everything had to be brought down to the studs, and we had to redo the entire thing. But it gave us an opportunity to kind of reinterpret it, which is really, really cool. So the reason I asked specifically is that tomorrow it's a free day at the museum, all day, 10 to 7. Come through if you'd like to, no charge. And if you would like a guided tour, I will be available to do that twice, noon and 6 o'clock. So people who work can come, people who don't work can come. And please keep that in mind if you want to pop over tomorrow, because we'd like to show it off to you. So let me start at the very beginning here. Okay, here it is. So that's what it looks like now. And we kind of wanted to make it look more urban, industrial, glasshousey. And of course, the iconic Sweeney Punch Bowl right in the center, which is a remarkable, remarkable story of glass. And then the pieces kind of arranged around it. You saw this when Mark was giving his poem. But this is part of our reinterpretation, is that we don't just talk about the pieces of glass anymore. Here, here's a lovely piece of Central. I'm looking at you, Dave. We also want to talk a little bit about the stories of the people who made the glass, and I'm going to include a couple of those in my talk today because those are fun. About how the glass is made, and some facts about some of the pieces. You see some of the earliest glass. The other thing, you all know what the major ingredient in glass is, right? Tell me. Right. Where do you get sand in Wheeling? Right. And then when you do that, it looks this color. It's going to be green or brown because of so much iron content in that sand. It's not pure. So it was great for the early stuff, but when you wanted the fancy lead crystal, you get it from Minnesota. The glass factory started doing that very early on. But because of Wheeling's location on the river, and because of the fact that we had all the material to make glass, this is a neat fact. So over 50% of all of the tableware, the pressed tableware ever made in America was made between Pittsburgh and Wheeling in the Ohio River corridor, which would include the great factories like Imperial. I'm looking at you, Ed, with your father, who was such an icon in the glass industry. Fostoria, these companies were giants. Hobbs Brock Jr. was the biggest in the world in 1879 because we had all the natural supply. We had that. We had limestone. Remember when there was limestone elementary school? It was so common, limestone was everywhere. Pulverize that. That's a stabilizing ingredient. They call it a flux. And then the big reason we had so much glass made here is because of the inexhaustible supply of fuel. You're heating something up, 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, 24/7. You need cheap fuel. We had it in abundance with coal and then later natural gas.
That's a stabilizing
And
ingredient.
That is why.
They
And then
call
we
it a
had the
flux.
Ohio River, which was a
And
major
then the
transportation
big thing-
route. 3 million people traveled the Ohio River on an annual basis, pretty much in the 1850s. It was huge. So that's why we had so much glass made in this area. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go again. Okay, I might need some technical help. Where is Sean? Yeah, I don't know. My slide won't move. Can you help me? Okay. How often do people say that? Where is Sean? Yes, it's baffling. Yes, isn't that a new one? I don't know how it happened. Well, there's our beginning. Okay, maybe that's what we just need to. There you go! Yay! Thank you, thank you. Oh, well, that's a glass batch. We already talked about this. The Fenton, at Fenton Art Glass Company, a friend of mine who was the chemist developed this for me. So this is like the exact proportion of what we would call a batch, like you're making a cake, of this much sand to this much lime to this much soda ash. And it's very simple. Okay, what we have in our collection is primarily glass made in the city limits of Wheeling. And our collection was founded in 1837, very, very early on. But we have a little bit of an outlier in this glass, which is beautiful. This is just a real pretty little punch bowl, 2 pieces, dates to 1825, made in Wellsburg by a company called Duval. He was sort of the financier. He had a glass cutter from Ireland, and it has a very Waterford crystal look to it because that was popular in the day. But this company, we have about 13 pieces of Duval in our collection as well. And they're all just stunningly simple and beautiful, I think. You all know about Ritchie Elementary School. The area was called Ritchie Town because of these 2 brothers, John and Craig Ritchie, who founded their glass factory back in 1829, and it closed after the Panic of 1837. So it didn't last even 10 years, but they made a significant amount of early lead crystal in the day when you were pressing it into shapes, and you didn't have the soda lime formula invented yet. And so the glass was the pattern was busy. They called it lacy glass for that reason, because you're not supposed to see the imperfections in it. But this is particularly neat. It's about 8.5 by 10 in size, not big. We actually think these were used as the windows in steamboats. And so when you see the steamboat with J&C Ritchie, this is the first pressed piece of glass with a Wheeling mark on it, but it's also the first with a Virginia mark on it. So you'll see this at Williamsburg in their museum as well, which is cool. That's just another Ritchie piece I acquired fairly recently for the museum. It's a sugar bowl. It's oval in shape, which is a very Wheeling thing. I don't know why in Wheeling we like oval sugar bowls in this time period, but we do. And it's got a wonky little, finial on the top. I put it on a display case so you could see the base, which is really beautiful and detailed, isn't it? Yeah, so just a simple little sugar bowl made in Wheeling about, 1832, 33. Now we're moving right along to the Sweeneys. This is Thomas Sweeney. He, like Denny, he was mayor of Wheeling for a time. And he was a very prominent glassmaker and had the first super successful glass house prior to the Civil War, located in North Wheeling, where the old Wheeling Hospital used to be, in that area. And it burned, all the records burned. Other than reading in the Wheeling newspapers, there are no catalogs, nothing's marked. I should point that out. Except for Northwood, none of this glass has a mark on the bottom of it. You just have to kind of know what it is, type of thing. But there's Mr. Sweeney with his glass walking stick looking very prominent and mayoral. And of course, that's the most famous piece of glass they ever produced. This is world renowned. I mean, I've had people from Waterford Crystal come visit it. It's a big deal. So you probably know about the history of the bowl, but there were 3 of these made. They were made pretty much as advertising pieces. They didn't know, they wouldn't have called them that in that time period. They called them their vases, and they're 5 feet tall. They weigh 225 pounds. They hold 16 gallons, and there were 3. And they were shipped all over the U.S. on railroad cars and steamboats to show off the ability of the makers. This is what we can do in Wheeling, Virginia. And it was a big deal. They won prizes all over the place. And then you know about this one because it ended up in Greenwood Cemetery, where it sat for 75 years. And it used to be a dare, I understand, that you could run down and touch it and come back out. But the Sweeney family, they were worried about its safekeeping. Originally, there was glass it was encased in glass. And if you look at this picture, you can see the reflection of the tree branch in the upper left. See that? Let me get out of your way, Joan. You're trying to see. Can you see? But then the glass all broke around it, and you could just touch it. The only thing that happened to it, there were prisms that went all the way around it, so it kind of looked very Victorian, candelabra-ish. Those wires rusted, fell to the base of the granite monument and broke. And we have a few of them broken. But that's the only damage that ever happened to this. We moved it in it was in the 1940s, 43, I think, for safekeeping. The other 2, for years, we didn't know what happened to them. One was given to Henry Clay. Do you know he was baptized in it? It's true. It was in the paper in the day talking about how he was baptized in the large glass vase donated by the gentleman from Wheeling. I know, it's sort of funny. And then that one just kind of disappeared, and you'd write to all the Clay descendants, and nobody knew what happened to it. Finally, we got a letter from a lady in her 90s, and she said, I remember this. It was in our family home, and in 1930, our house burned to the ground. It was destroyed. So one of them is destroyed. The other one was last seen in England in 1851, being packed to return to Wheeling, and never made it. So there you go. This is some of their examples of the amazing glass that the Sweeneys made. This bowl is very large punch bowl, but it just has all the characteristics. Super heavy lead crystal formula. They used a heavier lead. They use more lead in their formula than any other company I know, more than Pittsburgh. You can always tell a Sweeney piece because it will practically break your arm holding it. Super heavy. And that's just an example. And I think I have a decanter. Yeah, isn't that pretty? These are all prior to the Civil War. The company pretty much disbanded after the Civil War because a lot of their supply of things would be behind enemy lines. It was a very rough time to open up business. But that's our display of Sweeney. We're moving on to Hobbs, and I asked Sean for a pointer, which I hope I can make, because I want to show you some things. So this is the biggest factory at that time in America, and probably in the world, in 1879. And they had their own coal mine and their own miners on payroll on the other side of Route 2. It was a large production. They invented a lot of things here. This is where the soda lime formula was invented. They did a lot of revolutionary neat art glass and colors, and launched a lot of careers. Among local glass historians, we kind of call this the University of Hobbs. So kind of cool. And I want to point out, and I don't think you can see him very well, but there's a guy reading a book in the middle of the glass factory. Okay, now Sean, I might have to call him back. Oh dear, it's this guy here. Let me just do that, because he showed me how to use the pointer, but I kind of forgot. And I don't know where he is. That's okay. Anyway, we're pretty sure that's William Layton Jr. He was a Harvard graduate. and wrote a lot of local poetry. What was the Soldiers and Sailors? What did he do? Tell us.
When they dedicated the monument.
Yeah.
Let me show you that.
Oh, thank you. There he is reading, well, he's next to him. That's the guys at the workbench, actually, but you're close. Ah, there he is, reading a book. And so there was a local joke among the glass workers that if something didn't work out well, it's because there was too darn much poetry in the batch. They didn't use the word darn either. Charlie Brockunier, who was from Coleraine, he's a local guy, is right here with a beard. And it was William Layton's father who developed the soda lime formula in 1864 in Wheeling. So this is just a neat picture. This is a fascinating piece of campaign memorabilia when Abraham Lincoln was running for president in 1860. Can you see it? It says Bell and Everett, 1860, made by Hobbs Brockunier for this campaign. Everybody knows that he ran against Stephen A. Douglas, right, the little giant, but there was a guy from Tennessee, John Bell, and his running mate, Edward Everett. Try to say that fast 3 times, Edward Everett. And they commissioned Hobbs to make this bell for them. And it's just so neat that it survived as a piece of campaign memorabilia. And actually, it was John Bell that siphoned enough support from Stephen A. Douglas to permit Lincoln to win. So it was kind of a neat story. In 1876, we had the American Centennial. Huge thing, huge crowds, lots of people who wanted to show off what they were making, lots of glass factories who had exhibits there. And we had an exhibit from Hobbs there as well. This is a picture that they made. They had a fantastic engraver named Otto Jaeger. Otto Jaeger was amazing. And that, can you read the HB kind of in the center of that picture? It's amazing and remarkable what he could do. There's the H and the B. It was called a Fifth Avenue picture. And that's the side of it, with a rose on one side and a thistle on the other, that won a prize at the American Centennial for its amazing engraving work. Another one that was hand-cut, same idea. Other things in 1876 included this centennial pattern for the nation's birthday. They decided the Vikings were the first to come to America, so the nickname among glass collectors is the Viking pattern, and it's just kind of neat, isn't it? With the little Viking head on the top. When the Statue of Liberty came to America, the hand and the torch came first. They were on display at the American Centennial, and it's neat. I wish I had a picture to show you of it, but you can look it up. You know, this huge, huge hand and torch, and it was exhibited there and then moved to Battery Park in New York City, and you were charged, I think, a fraction, maybe even a penny, to see it, and part of those funds were used to make the base for the statue, to build the base for the statue. But that inspired a lot of glass hands, and Hobbs had their hand too, and this is just a cake plate with a hand. It came in 3 different sizes. Everybody probably could buy one. You can always tell the Hobbs hand because she has this very nice manicure and a very nice little bracelet too. Other things that they did, this is fun. Frances Cleveland was the only girl to marry a president when he was in the White House, and she was young. Like 21 or 2, and he was 48. But they named this, it wasn't a pattern, it's the color. They named the color combination Frances after her. Who knows what Frances thought? I'm sure they didn't even ask her, but it's not been reproduced. So if you ever see it, it's pretty cool stuff. It's a silver nitrate stain that makes that kind of an amber color on the glass. So the 1880s, it was a big time in Wheeling in that day. This is the icon of art glass. It's called, the Peach Blow vase. And it all happened in 1886 when Mary Morgan, who was the widow of a shipping magnate, not J.P., but Charles Morgan was his name, she auctioned off her art collection for charity in New York City. And among the pieces was a vase that looked like this with a dragon stand. It was an ancient Chinese vase. It wasn't made of glass. It was ceramic. But the color was like this, and everybody just fell in love with it. And the newspapers talked about how it was called peach bloom. It became synonymous with opulence and wealth. You could buy peach bloom lipstick and rouge, and it was a big deal. The vase went for an unheard of amount of money at that time. Remember, this is 1886. It went for $18,000. The guy who bought it was Charles Walters. The Walters Art Gallery is in Baltimore. You can go visit it. You can go see the original vase. But Hobbs did their version. It was a marketing thing, very smart. And that's an example of Hobbs' Peach Blow. You know what makes that color? Anybody know? Yay! Who said that? Very good, Joan. Yes. Gold is added to the batch to get that ruby red color. When you first make a piece with gold, the whole piece is just this color. Then you reheat it, it's heat-sensitive formula, and it strikes that beautiful red color. There's a lot of chemistry, obviously, in glass, but it's very interesting how incredibly talented these glass workers were. That's our examples of peach blow. I know. The table at the bottom, can you see it? You can't really tell it's a table, right? So that's the top of it. It came to us broken. We didn't break it, just so you know. This would be the base would be right here, and that would be the top that the table would rest on, and that's a snake going around it. The story is this table was made by a Hobbs worker to pay off his bar tab. And it was in South Wheeling in a bar for years. When I first started in the 80s, my mentor was John Artsberger. He was director of the museum. And his boss had been a guy named Bob DiBartolomeo, who was a absolutely fantastic researcher in glass. Bob had wanted it for years, and the bar owner would not give it up. And I guess Bob was a big pipe smoker back in the day, and I guess when the table was donated to us in the early 70s, he was so excited he bit his pipe stem in half when it came in the door. Daisy and Button is another big pattern that was made by Hobbs and many other companies in an amberina, which again is glass with gold, super heavy. And I never read during my talks, but I have a quick little story to tell you about when they brought natural gas to the city of Wheeling in 1886, which is the same time period as this. So if you'll indulge me, let me just tell you. Charles brought, and I'm reading this is a article in Antiques Magazine from 1974, written by Bob DiBartolomeo, and I just want to read these two paragraphs because they are hilarious. Charles Brock Jr., a Hobbs partner, became president of the Wheeling Manufacturing Gas Company, which brought natural gas here in 1886. Since he'd done so much to accomplish this, Brock Jr. was selected to preside at the celebration when the gas was lit. His daughter, Shirley, would do the actual lighting. A 95-foot pipe was erected over the glass valve. Thousands gathered to watch, bands played, and fireworks boomed. Lighting time approached, and the tall pipe was filled with gas. Shirley, get this, Shirley was in the second story of a window of the tall building near the pipe. She was given a Roman candle and told to shoot the flaming balls down the pipe. She missed. Another one's given to her, and she tried again, and this time she was successful, but exactly when the flames began to whoosh out of the pipe, in true Wheeling fashion, a torrential downpour came from the skies and put out the flame. When the rain stopped, the process was repeated a third time, but no one had remembered to turn off the valve. So the gas exploded with a large boom rattling nearby windows. Flame erupted from the pipe and singed Miss Brock Jr.'s eyebrows and hair. But as the Wheeling paper said, no other harm was done, and the crowd, which had not dispersed, was delighted with the display. I don't know what Shirley thought. This was a holy grail for me. These are tumblers. You see the original catalog picture. Hobbs produced catalogs for their salesmen. We know a lot about what they made from these catalogs, and they were beautifully lined drawings in full color. And I wanted a box of tumblers. I finally found an original box of tumblers at a Carlisle, PA. It unfortunately has Scotch tape on the edges, but it doesn't matter. But it's very cool to find an original box like that. Yeah. Opalescent glass, they made a ton of this as well. Heat-sensitive formula that strikes white instead of red, like peach blow. Fancy glass. And this is fun because it's a vase. Inviting President Cleveland to visit Wheeling. As cordial and guests of the city earnestly urge your acceptance. Charlie Brock Jr. was the chair at the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce at the time, so they gave Mr. President Cleveland a glass vase invitation. Didn't impress him, though. He didn't come. So we have it in our museum, which I'm happy to say. Crystallina is a formula that was designed by Hanson Waddell, whose grandson is in our audience, Mr. J. Fry. And it's just another example of the type of glass that was everyday wear, made for everyday people who could afford it. And that was a huge market in this day. Mr. Waddell had a walking stick, which is now in our museum, because you can read this, a major fire broke out in the factory, and he was superintendent, and he and John Hobbs were able to save the factory and start glass working again in 2 days with minimal loss of wages. So the walking stick is a thank you for the high esteem they held for Mr. Waddell for kind of saving their jobs. And I was teasing Phyllis Siegel over here because her grandson came to visit the museum last year when he was 7, Henry. And Henry informed me that this is the only interesting piece in the entire museum. Because it's the only piece that's not glass. I love that. It's a typical 7-year-old boy, you know. This is Central. Moving along to our 5 major factories. This was located in East Wheeling, and a lot of the workers lived in what was called Goosetown at the time. And they made, still called Goosetown, you're saying. See, I'm not from Wheeling, so I have a disadvantage to that. People have to show me where these places are. Anyway, oops, there's the walking stick. So Central took advantage of the soda lime formula, and almost every single thing they made was pressed and then shipped carloads and tons all over the United States, all over Europe. It's interesting, and I should tell you that glass I've documented in the Wheeling papers. I've found it shipped everywhere in the country. Persia, Iceland, Greenland, throughout South America, throughout Europe. I've met glass collectors of Wheeling glass in Australia. They're a fun bunch. So that's just some examples of just the breadth and the depth of the glass made in Wheeling. The patterns that was made by Central, again, tableware, massive amounts of tableware when we were using this instead of China. And kind of fun colors like cobalt, diamond point pattern, this is called. Log cabin is a big deal. You've all heard of log cabin syrup. Everybody knows about this. Log cabin is very, very collectible today. We can talk to Dave, who's a descendant of Central's owners. Here's to tell the difference between a reproduction, because they're making reproductions. If you go to Williams-Sonoma in South Hills now, you can buy a picture in this exact pattern. How do you know the difference between an original and one being made now? It's the latch, the door latch. See that? If it doesn't have it, it's not the original thing. It's so simple. But none of the molds have that door latch. Too much detail, I guess. This was extremely popular pattern. I hope this looks familiar to you people of Wheeling. What does this candlestick look like to you? Well, you knew that. Okay. If Marty said it, then that's, and by the way, Marty's also descendant of the Hobbs family, so I need to recognize that. That's cool. Yes, John Osterling designed, who was president of the company, he designed this piece to look like the Wheeling suspension bridge. These are so rare, I only have one of them. I don't even have both candlesticks, but I'm thrilled to be able to show it to you and to tell you a little bit about the people who founded this company, because they were 8 guys who worked at Hobbs and they were unhappy with their pay. So they formed their own company, located in an old pork packing place in Fulton originally, and it became a multi-million-dollar business under these guys. And they were great glass workers. So it's kind of a neat story. Some more kind of the examples that we have. They just did massive, massive amounts of glass, almost all pressed, all tableware, all different and colorful colors. This is their most collectible pattern, and was the first collectible glass ever in America, so of course it's Wheeling. It's coin glass. Now, Fostoria made a version of this, but if you look at those coins, they're not going to be mistaken for the real thing. And it is really a true story so it was made in 1892 using exact replicas of the day, exact replicas of the currency of the day. That's why they were considered counterfeiting. The U.S. Treasury Department literally made them stop making this. Even though, obviously, and there's not even real glass in it. You can't melt it down. There's no coins in there. It was the talent of the mold maker, which is extraordinary to make this stuff. But yes, just after about 4 months, the government said, I'm sorry. The newspaper in the day said, popular glassware condemned. Very dramatic. And so what they had to do then, and I think this would have been heartbreaking for the mold maker, because imagine chipping these in cast. I mean, you take a solid chunk of iron and a chisel, and you design this stuff. These mold makers were extraordinary, important part of the glass industry. And so you're taking this currency of the day, and you're making it backwards, so when you pour the mold in, it forward to you, right? It's extraordinary. Anyway, he had to take all these out, re-chip them, and do kind of a Queen Isabella, and then they sent it to the Centennial, or the Columbian Exposition in 1893. But it was a big lesson to learn. And I remember talking to Ken Dalzell, president of Fostoria back in the day, and he told me that when they made their version of coin glass, even though they were using what looked like monopoly money, they actually paid for and had a guy from the U.S. Treasury Department come down and sanction it before they started, just to be sure. Central was the longest lived of the companies and survived until really the Depression kind of did them in 1939. So this is the fun stuff that they were making in the 20s. Isn't that pretty and fun colors and very modern looking? This is called Francis, not Mrs. Cleveland Francis. They made what we call elegant depression. So the Griffin pattern, this was sent to President Harding at the White House. This pattern is called Balda. He was a decorator for the company, Joseph Balda. And this was Governor Morgan from West Virginia sent to his place. So this glass is, it's on the tables of the White House. I love this Chippendale pattern. Very 20s, right? And these were in the store window the day that the factory closed, which is very sad. Very modern-looking console set is what they would call this in the day. But yeah, this company left a big legacy, but closed just because of the Depression. Now, last but not least is Northwood, which took over the old Hobbs factory after it closed in 1893. Northwood, Harry Northwood, came from a glassmaking family. And this is a slide from Corning Museum of Glass, which is the biggest in the world, biggest glass museum in the world. And it's on display there. This is what his dad was making. So this is a replica of a very important vase at the British Museum that you can visit, called the Portland vase, because it was owned by the Duchess of Portland. But in reality, the original in England was made back in the ancient Roman days. Those guys, Romans were great glassmakers. People don't realize it, but they had the techniques and the talents that would rival anything you would see even in the 1880s, in the heydays of Hobbs and Central. And they had made this fantastic vase back in the ancient Roman times. And it was a technique that everybody thought had been lost. Nobody thought you could do it again. It was on display at the British Museum when, as the records say, it was, quote unquote, smashed to bits by an insane visitor. This guy threw a sculpture at it. Nobody knows why. They recorded his name. I don't remember it, and so it was smashed to bits, and it was a reward. This was in 1845. Anybody who could reproduce it again. Now, Wedgwood came out and did a version in pottery. Northwood came out and did this version in glass, and he became like a job for life. So this was John Northwood. His eldest son was Harry, and Harry learned from his dad, went to art school in Stourbridge. I said Massachusetts because I'm from New England. It's just an automatic thing. Stourbridge, England. And he came to Wheeling for his first job at age 21. Where do you go? Hobbs. He became a decorator. This guy was good too. Look at what he did when he was 22 for his fiancée. Pretty cool, huh? It's a brooch of Shakespeare. It's made in cameo glass, where you're cutting layers of glass. And it was so unusual that nobody knew what to do. It was on exhibit at the West Virginia State Fair on Wheeling Island in 1882. And they described it, but they didn't know how to describe it. The curator of American Glass at Corning, she's passed away now, but she told me when we first acquired this piece that she thinks it may be the only piece of carved cameo made in America. It's almost all European, almost all English. So pretty cool. And it came to us from Harry Northwood's granddaughter, Miss Elizabeth Robb, who donated it to the museum. So Northwood took over the old Hobbs plant and made glass until really the plant closed because he passed away. And the last fact, they quit in 1925. But this is the kind of stuff that Northwood was making. Tableware, all different colors and styles that appealed to that Edwardian taste. You want to be unique, but you have to conform, in this time period. Everybody in this room, all of us would have had a 4-piece table set had we been living back in the day. So here's your quiz. And people like Ed Gutsky can't play because he already knows. This is the hard one, so we'll wait. What's this for? Right. And by the way, you have covered everything because you don't have screens until the 1920s. Yikes. Okay, what's this one? Creamer. Now, do you know what this is? Yay! Who said that? Very good. It's a spooner. Do you know what that is? Yeah, because drinking coffee was so common. It was mostly for coffee. Tea costs a lot. Coffee drinkers, us Americans. That everybody had one. It would cost you a quarter for each one of these or a whole $1 back in the day. But that's what everybody had one. And this one, by the way, I love this story. So this pattern's called Mikado. Harry Northwood named it himself after seeing Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado at the Court Theater. It's just one of those great Wheeling stories. This was one of the earliest types of what we call carnival glass today, which is the poor man's Tiffany. This particular color is called, collectors call it marigold. Harry Northwood called it golden iris. I just want to remind everybody, when you look at it with the bright lights that we have at the museum, you're looking at it with the wrong light, really. Because this was made in a day and an age when you have it on an oak table with a kerosene lamp. So it looks, shinier. This piece of carnival is so big that the kids that were helping to spray the sulfide solution on it to make it shiny went on strike. They locked the factory doors and threw bottles and rocks at the factory managers till they got a nickel raise. Remember, this is the days of child labor. You could start at the age of 9. But this is a very big, heavy, 16-inch wide punch bowl, and I think the price is on here. Yes, in 1911, you had to pay $4.25 for that and the cups. It's a lot of money back in the day, though. Love this picture. Harry Northwood was so proud that he actually had a professional photographer take photos of the inside of the factory. There aren't a lot of interior photos of factories in this day, I have to tell you. But you see it's sort of funny. So there's 2 different unions in this time. And unions are extremely important. The first glassmakers union is one of the first unions in the United States. That originally was formed in Pittsburgh. This group is called the Knights of Labor. Labor Day parades come from that. So this guy, he's in the miscellaneous union. He does the cleaning. He has a white, clean shirt on. He's a factory manager. He's not working the floor. Child labor here. Presser. Pressers make the most money of anybody in this room except for him. It requires the most knowledge of just knowing how much to press down on that lever for how long to make the perfect piece of glass. Remember, he's making this pitcher. I'll show you in a little bit more about that pitcher and how many you had to make in a turn to make your wage and move scale. But it's just kind of fun to look at that. All the numbers indicate the different formulas around these giant furnaces. This guy is posing, but he has a rod of hot glass. It's just a fun picture. Other than what they're wearing, if you walk into a glass factory, except for the child labor and their clothes, it looks just the same. The industry doesn't change. Some of the stuff that Northwood was making in the 20s, including this stuff, which looks a lot like Fiesta ware 10 years before Fiesta ware. Here it is. Okay, take a look at this. There are 250 of these made in a turn, which is 4.5 hours, and it takes 8 people to make one of those. Compare it to the Hobbs basket, where you only can make 150 in a turn, and it's up to 31 people to make a basket. It just goes to show you, there's a lot of skill involved in this. A little bit about the labor unions, the Knights of Labor mug, designed by John Osterling, which is unusual because he was a factory manager making a mug for a union. It was a big thing, and the badges they wore. When we had the redo, we had the opportunity to have a changing exhibition gallery, something we'd never had before, thanks to Jay Fry and Michael Hires. And so I want to just kind of briefly take you through. The exhibit that we have on right now is Cheers to Wheeling. It's a celebration of wheeling partyware. So you see punch bowls and glassware and pitchers. I love this because Victorians loved ice cream. And so I got fake ice cream from Etsy. But it looks pretty good. This is an ice cream set. I think that's fun. Some of you guys might be interested in the beer mugs, including the 69-ounce Rubicon. You drink that, you have crossed the Rubicon. I compare this to the 7-ounce ladies' beer mug. But some fun things in here. Tom and Jerry sets were a big thing. They're kind of like an eggnog, not glass, but ceramic, but of the period. And an Epergne And you have flowers at the top and then fresh fruit at the bottom. Glass of Perns were all the rage. They're European as well as American made. And, you know, they became popular in the 1880s on through to the 1920s. Just use some more examples, including finger bowls, very dainty finger bowls on the center shelf, and celery vases. Celery was such a prized vegetable that you actually displayed it on your table like a vase with the stalks and all the leaves, because you had to have money to have refrigeration to have celery. It was a very big way to show off your wealth. Stars and stripes pattern on the top and a wonderful little coin glass piece. Spoon. This is a special Victorian holder just for spoons and one for toothpicks. Very specifically, you know, specific uses. And the cake stand is pretty with my fake cake. Very elegant pieces made by Central, including the small one here is the oyster cocktail. And then, you know, the different wine and aperitif and water goblets as well. The napkin has Mrs. Ogilvy's initials on it that I brought over from the mansion because it's very elegant at the time. They made some elegant barware in the day. And I love this quote. It fits our party theme. And the last is just we have a wonderful collection of glass canes as well, and kind of that neat thing. So that's it. Come to the museum tomorrow for free if you want to see it, and I'm happy to give you a guided tour at noon or 6. Do you have any questions? Sean said I should give some time for questions.
If you have a question, raise your hand and I'll come to you with the mic.
Wow, it's like a game show or something.
Where was the Hobbs factory located?
Oh, that's a good question. I forgot to tell you. It was in South Wheeling. And so part of where Kennedy Hardware is also part of the old Hobbs factory. Now, back in the days when Bruce Clark owned some of that property, you could go out and make digs in the parking lot and pick up pieces of Hobbs glass. It was amazing. Yeah, thank you for asking, because I meant to tell you.
Suffer any kind of lung?
So that's a really good question, too. I had a friend of mine who's a glass historian, and he did a thing where he actually studied the actuarial charts from the insurance companies. And it's interesting. They had the same lifespan as anybody else. And they're breathing in silica, sand. And I mean, some of the glass formulas have arsenic in them. It is, yeah. A lot of the early milk glass had arsenic in it. And it's just absolutely astonishing. That's a great question.
Any more questions?
There's somebody in the back.
Was Carnival glass made at many factories or just one?
5 major factories made Carnival, and that would be Fenton started it in 1906. Followed closely by Northwood in 1907. It was made at Westmoreland. It was made at Imperial. And there's one other, I can't remember, maybe Fenton. There were 5 major companies that made it. And it wasn't called that at the time, of course. It was very popular before World War I. And then after the war, taste changed. People didn't want it. We had warehouses full of it, so they started giving it prizes at carnivals. That's where the nickname came from. These are all such great questions. Thank you.
Anybody else? I thought I saw someone here in the middle.
Well, thank you for staying awake after lunch. Thanks for coming.